Hey everyone, quick look at this. See that? Almost 98% of you watching aren't subscribed yet. Subscribing is the best way to not miss any new infidelity stories and support what we do here. It's free and it makes a huge difference. Hit that subscribe button below. Okay, now to today's story.
Listen, I know what you're thinking. You see a woman my age, been through the mill, divorce papers and all that stuff, and you probably figure her romantic life is about as exciting as watching paint dry. And honestly, for 11 years, that's exactly how I liked it. Dry as a desert. Built myself a nice little fortress of routine. Wake up coffee, maybe a crossword if I was feeling ambitious. Work, dinner, TV, bed, repeat. It wasn't thrilling, but it was safe, predictable. After all the drama of the split, predictable felt like winning the lottery. I'd put up these walls, brick by boring brick, to keep the loneliness out. Sounds sad, I know. And maybe it was. But it was my sad, comfortable in its own way. Like an old armchair that's seen better days, but you just can't bring yourself to throw out. But then my knee started acting up. That darn arthritis, you know? The doctor said I needed to get more active, strengthen the muscles around it. So, reluctantly, I started thinking about a personal trainer. Me. In a gym, surrounded by all those young whippersnappers in their lycra. The thought alone made me want to reach for another painkiller. But I knew I had to do it. For myself. For my health. So I bit the bullet and signed up for a few sessions at the local fitness place. Figured I'd get in, get it done, and get out. No need to make friends or anything. Keep it strictly professional. That was the plan anyway. Little did I know, life had a funny way of throwing a wrench in even the most carefully laid plans. And this particular wrench came in the form of a young man named Elijah. He was supposed to come by on a Tuesday afternoon, around 2 o'clock. I remember looking out the window every few minutes, half hoping he wouldn't show. The doorbell rang just as I was microwaving a cup of soup. Great, just great. My peaceful afternoon was officially over. He wasn't what I expected, not at all. I'd pictured some muscle-bound guy with a shaved head and a whistle. You know, the type who yells at you to do one more rep even when your lungs are about to explode. But Elijah? He was different. Younger, definitely. Probably not even 30, I guessed. Which, let's be honest, made me feel about 100. But he had this easy smile and kind of a shy way about him. Not intimidating at all. He had this messy brown hair that kept falling into his eyes, and he'd push it back with his hand. It was endearing, I suppose, is the word. He introduced himself, his voice a little nervous, and we started with the usual small talk. The weather, how my knee was feeling, that sort of thing. Nothing too deep. But even in those first few minutes, I felt a little crack in my fortress. Walls. Just a tiny one, maybe. Like a hairline fracture you don't even notice at first. He asked me about my goals, what I wanted to achieve, and I surprised myself by actually telling him. Not just about my knee, but about feeling stuck. Like I was in a rut. He listened intently, nodding every now and then. It wasn't just polite listening, you could tell. He actually seemed to care. We moved on to the exercises, and he was patient and encouraging. He didn't push me too hard, but he also didn't let me slack off. There was this comfortable rhythm to our session. We'd do a set, then chat for a minute or two. And those little chats, they started to become the part I looked forward to the most. We talked about everything and nothing, books we'd read, movies we'd seen. He even told me about his struggles trying to start his own business. It was nice to just talk to someone, really talk, not just the usual polite exchanges you have with the cashier at the grocery store. It felt like connection. Something I hadn't realized how much I'd been missing. That little crack in my wall was starting to widen. The sessions went on like that for a few weeks. Twice a week, Elijah would come over, and for that hour, my boring routine would get a shot of something different. Energy, maybe. Or maybe just plain human interaction. I started looking forward to Tuesdays and Thursdays. I'd even find myself putting on a little bit of makeup before he came over, which was something I hadn't bothered with in years. We'd finish the exercises, and then we'd often end up just sitting in the living room talking, sometimes for half an hour, sometimes longer. It felt easy, natural, like we'd known each other for years. And then one afternoon, after a particularly good session where my knee actually felt a little better, it happened. He was packing up his bag, and I thanked him for his help. He smiled that shy smile of his, and then he just leaned in. It wasn't planned, I don't think. It just happened. Our lips met, just for a brief moment. It wasn't some passionate Hollywood-style kiss. It was soft, tentative, but it sent a jolt through me like a lightning strike. My brain kind of short-circuited for a second. I didn't know what to do, what to say. He pulled back, his cheeks a little flushed. I'm sorry, he mumbled, looking down at his bag. I shouldn't have done that. And then he was gone, just like that, out the door, leaving me standing there in my living room, my heart pounding in my chest, wondering what in the world had just happened. That little crack in my wall, it had just shattered into a million pieces. The next morning was weird. I kept replaying the kiss in my head, over and over again. What did it mean? Was it a mistake? Had I imagined the connection I thought we had? I felt a confusing mix of emotions. Embarrassment, definitely. But also, something else. Something I hadn't felt in a long, long time. A spark. A flicker of hope? It was ridiculous, I knew. The age difference alone. People would talk. My friends, my family. What would they say? But despite all the doubts swirling around in my head, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. Something had changed. He didn't call that day. Or the next. I started to think maybe it had been a mistake. Maybe he regretted it. Maybe I'd completely misread the situation. I felt that familiar pang of loneliness creeping back in, trying to rebuild those walls I'd started to tear down. But then, on Friday afternoon, my phone rang. It was him. He sounded a little hesitant, but he asked if I was free to grab a coffee. Just as friends, he added quickly, but I could hear something else in his voice, a hint of something more. I said yes. Of course, I said yes. I spent the next hour trying to figure out what to wear, feeling like a teenager getting ready for her first date. It was silly, I know, but it felt good to feel that flutter of anticipation again. To feel like maybe, just maybe, there was something more to this unexpected connection. We met at a little coffee shop downtown. It was awkward at first, a lot of nervous smiles and avoiding eye contact. But as we started talking, the awkwardness faded away. We talked about the kiss, about how it made us both feel. He admitted he'd been nervous, unsure of how I'd react, and I told him the truth. That it had surprised me, but not in a bad way. We talked about the age difference, the potential judgment from others. It was all out in the open, honest, and a little bit scary. But there was also this undeniable connection between us. A feeling that we understood each other on a level that went beyond age or anything else. As the days turned into weeks, we continued to see each other. Not just as trainer and client anymore. We went for walks in the park, had dinner at each other's places. We talked for hours about our lives, our hopes, our fears. It wasn't always easy. There were definitely moments of doubt, moments where we wondered if we were making a mistake. But the joy and the hope that came with this newfound intimacy, it was worth it. It reminded me that life, even after all the bumps and bruises, can still surprise you. it can still throw you a curveball that turns out to be the best pitch you've ever seen. So yeah, maybe it's not the typical love story. Maybe people will raise their eyebrows. But you know what? For the first time in a long time, I feel truly happy. And that, at my age, is a pretty damn good feeling. You just never know where you'll find connection, do you? Sometimes it walks right through your front door, wearing lycra and a shy smile. And sometimes you just have to let it in, even if it means tearing down a few walls. So things with Elijah were going well. Surprisingly well, if I'm being honest. We'd been seeing each other for a few months, and it felt normal, in a good way. But I knew the time had come to, introduce him to the troops. My friends. I have a small circle of very dear friends, women I've known for decades. They've been through thick and thin with me, seen me at my best, and definitely at my worst. Their opinions matter to me, maybe more than I'd like to admit. But I also knew that if I kept Elijah a secret, it would just create more problems down the line. Plus, I was proud of him. And happy. And I wanted to share that, even if it felt a little daunting, I decided to host a small dinner party. Just the core group, Carol, Susan, and Margaret. I told them I wanted them to meet someone special. I didn't give them too many details beforehand, just that his name was Elijah, and he was a bit younger. I could practically hear the unspoken questions crackling through the phone line. The night of the dinner, I was a nervous wreck. I'd spent hours cleaning the house, fussing over the food. Elijah arrived right on time, looking handsome in a button-down shirt. He brought a bottle of wine and a bouquet of flowers, which was a nice touch. The initial introductions were a little stiff, as expected. Everyone was polite, but I could feel the undercurrent of curiosity, maybe even a little skepticism. The conversation started out light, about work and the weather. But then Carol, bless her heart, couldn't resist. "So, Elijah," she said, her eyes twinkling with a hint of mischief, "Jennifer tells us you're a personal trainer. How did you two meet?" Elijah handled it like a pro, explaining how he'd come to my house for my knee exercises. Susan chimed in with a question about his age, which made me cringe inwardly. He answered honestly, and there was a brief, slightly awkward silence. I tried to steer the conversation in a different direction, but I could feel the whispers starting in my head. What were they really thinking? Were they judging him? Were they worried about me? As the evening went on, things started to loosen up a bit. Elijah was charming and engaging, and he genuinely seemed interested in getting to know my friends. He told them about his dreams of opening his own fitness studio, and they seemed impressed by his ambition. By the end of the night, the atmosphere had definitely warmed up. There were still a few lingering glances, and I caught Susan giving me a knowing look as Elijah helped me clear the dishes. But overall, I think it went better than I'd expected. Later that night, after Elijah had left, Carol called me. "He seems like a nice young man, Jen," she said. "But are you sure about this? The age difference." I sighed. "I know, Carol. I know what everyone's thinking. But he makes me happy. And that's what matters, right?" There was a pause. "As long as you're happy, honey," she said finally. "That's all that matters." But I knew the whispers wouldn't stop there. And I knew that navigating those external opinions would be another hurdle we'd have to face. A few months passed, and life with Elijah settled into a comfortable rhythm. We had our routines, our inside jokes, and our quiet evenings spent watching old movies. I was genuinely happy, probably happier than I'd been in years. But then, out of the blue, Elijah got some news that kind of shook things up. He'd been working part-time at a gym while trying to get his own business off the ground, and the owner of the gym, who was getting ready to retire, had offered to sell him the whole place. It was a huge opportunity for Elijah, something he'd been dreaming about for years. But the gym was located about an hour away, in a smaller town I'd never even heard of. He was excited, of course. His eyes lit up when he told me about it, talking about all the possibilities. But I could also see the worry in his eyes. He knew this would change things between us. An hour might not seem like a lot, but it would mean less time together. More planning, more effort. We sat down that evening and talked about it for hours. He didn't want to leave me, he said. He loved our life together. But this was his chance, his big break. I tried to be supportive, to tell him to go for it. And I meant it. I did. But deep down, I felt a pang of something. Not jealousy, exactly. More like a fear of the unknown. A fear of things changing. Again. We talked about what it would mean for us. Would I move with him? I wasn't sure. I had my life here, my friends, my house. Starting over in a new town, away from everything I knew. It felt daunting. But the thought of him being an hour away, of only seeing him on weekends, that didn't feel right either. We didn't come to any easy answers that night. We just held each other, the weight of the decision hanging heavy in the air between us. It made me think about our age difference in a way I hadn't before. He was just starting out, building his career, while I was pretty much settled. Our paths were diverging, and we had to figure out if we could still walk them together. It was perplexing, trying to balance his dreams with my realities. And it definitely threw a burst of uncertainty into our otherwise smooth sailing. The decision about the gym took a few weeks to finalize. Elijah weighed his options, talked to mentors, and ultimately decided to go for it. I supported him, even though a part of me was sad about the changes it would bring. We talked a lot during that time, really honest, sometimes difficult conversations about our future. We realized that we both wanted to make it work, but it would require some adjustments and compromises. I decided that I wasn't ready to move to the small town just yet. I still loved my house, my friends, my life here. But we agreed to make the hour-long drive on weekends, to spend as much quality time together as we could. And you know what? It worked. It wasn't always easy. There were weekends when one of us was too tired to make the drive, or when other commitments got in the way. But we made it a priority. We talked on the phone every day, sometimes just for a few minutes, sometimes for hours. And when we were together, we made the most of it. We explored the little town where his gym was located and found cute cafes and hiking trails. I even started volunteering at a local animal shelter there, something I'd always wanted to do but never had the time for. The distance actually brought us closer in some ways. We learned to appreciate our time together even more, and it gave me a little space to rediscover myself too. With Elijah focusing on his new business during the week, I found myself with more time for my own hobbies and interests. I started painting again, something I hadn't done since I was in college. I joined a book club. I even took a pottery class. It was like I was blossoming in this new phase of my life. And Elijah was my biggest cheerleader, always encouraging me to pursue my passions. One weekend, I drove out to see him, and we woke up early to watch the sunrise over the hills surrounding his town. We sat there in comfortable silence, holding hands, the sky slowly turning from dark blue to shades of pink and orange. At that moment, I felt a deep sense of peace and contentment. Life had thrown us a curveball, but we'd managed to catch it. We'd found a way to make our relationship work, even with the distance. And I realized that my happiness wasn't dependent on where I lived or how often I saw Elijah. It was about the connection we shared and the love and support we gave each other. It was about finding joy in the unexpected twists and turns of life. And as we sat there, watching the sunrise together, I knew that this new chapter, even with its challenges, was going to be a good one, a really good one. The day dawned bright and sunny, almost like the weather itself was celebrating with us. I woke up with a strange mix of nerves and excitement bubbling inside me, a feeling I hadn't experienced in, well, decades. Today was the day. After all the unexpected twists and turns, after the doubts and the whispers, Elijah and I were finally getting married. It had been a relatively small affair, just close friends and family. We didn't want a big, fussy wedding. We just wanted to celebrate our love and commitment in a simple, heartfelt way. We'd chosen a beautiful little spot in the countryside, a place with rolling hills and a charming old barn that had been converted into a reception hall. It felt perfect, peaceful and intimate, just like our relationship. The morning was a whirlwind of activity. My girlfriends, Carol, Susan, and Margaret, were all there, bustling around, helping me get ready. There was a lot of laughter, a few happy tears, and the kind of comfortable camaraderie that only comes from years of shared history. As I looked at myself in the mirror, in the simple but elegant dress I'd chosen, I couldn't help but smile. I felt beautiful, not just physically, but in a way that came from the inside out, a happiness that radiated from my soul. Elijah was getting ready at his place, with his best friend, Mark. I'd gotten a few texts from him, short, sweet messages filled with anticipation. It was funny how even after all this time, he still made my heart skip a beat. The ceremony itself was lovely. We'd written our own vows, and standing there, holding Elijah's hands, looking into his eyes as we promised to love and cherish each other for the rest of our lives, it was more emotional than I'd expected. There were tears, of course, but mostly there was just this overwhelming feeling of love and gratitude. When the officiant pronounced us husband and wife, and Elijah leaned in to kiss me, the applause and cheers from our loved ones felt like the most beautiful symphony. The reception was a relaxed and joyful affair. There was good food, good music, and even better company. Seeing our families and friends all together, celebrating our happiness, was truly heartwarming. My kids were there, of course, and they were so happy for me. They'd taken to Elijah right away, and seeing them all interacting so naturally, like one big, slightly unconventional family, filled me with an immense sense of contentment. Elijah and I spent most of the evening by each other's side, laughing, talking, and just soaking it all in. There were a few moments when I caught myself looking around, a little surprised by it all. Here I was, a woman who thought her chance at true love had passed, starting a new chapter with a man who was younger than my own children. It was unconventional, maybe even a little crazy, but it was our story, and it was beautiful. Later in the evening, as the music softened and people started to wind down, Elijah took my hand and led me outside. The stars were out, shining brightly in the clear night sky. We stood there for a few moments, just holding each other, the sounds of laughter and conversation drifting out from the barn behind us. "So," he said, turning to me with that familiar, shy smile. "Mrs." He paused, a playful glint in his eyes. "How does it feel?" I laughed, leaning my head on his shoulder. "It feels perfect, Elijah. Absolutely perfect." We stood there for a long time, just enjoying the quiet beauty of the night, the warmth of each other's embrace. In that moment, all the doubts and uncertainties that had lingered in the beginning felt like distant memories. We had faced the judgment, navigated the age difference, and built a life together based on love, respect, and a whole lot of laughter. This wasn't the end of our story, of course. It was just the beginning of a new chapter. A chapter filled with shared dreams, quiet moments, and the comforting knowledge that we had found something truly special in each other. And as I looked up at the stars, with my husband by my side, I knew that life, even in its most unexpected ways, had a beautiful way of surprising you. And sometimes, those surprises turn out to be the greatest blessings of all. This moment, this celebration, it was a testament to that. A moment to cherish, a moment to remember, and a moment that marked the beginning of our forever. Thanks for watching. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any new infidelity story.